She froze beneath the chandelier's glow, one hand on the ballroom door, ready to disappear before anyone noticed she didn't belong there. Her borrowed dress itched, her breath was tight, and her heart carried a tiredness she never said aloud. Then, a man in a navy suit stepped into her path, eyes unsettled, voice barely a whisper. "Please, pretend you're with me," a stranger's plea, a night she didn't want, and a moment she never chose, but one that would change everything. If you've ever stood on the edge of a moment you didn't choose, but somehow changed everything, this story might feel familiar. Let's begin. Claire paused mid-step, her breath hitching when she felt a presence just inches behind her. She turned, startled, as a tall man in a navy suit leaned toward her, his voice barely a whisper, warm enough to brush the side of her neck. "Please, pretend you're with me." For a moment, the sounds of the ballroom clinking glasses, rising laughter, the faint echo of a jazz quartet seemed to fall away. Claire simply stared at him. The soft gold light from the chandelier above cast a shimmer across the polished floor and caught on the uneasy glint in his eyes. She didn't know him. He didn't know her. And yet, the urgency in his voice made something inside her still. She swallowed, unsure whether she had misheard. "I'm sorry." "What?" The man's jaw tightened. He shifted, positioning himself between her and the two women gliding toward them in sequined gowns. "Please," he murmured again, barely moving his lips. "Just for a moment, act like we came here together." Claire's fingers tightened around the strap of her borrowed clutch. She had wanted nothing more than to slip through the side door unnoticed and breathe again, far from the swirl of wealth and confidence she had never learned to wear. Now, she stood frozen, caught in a stranger's plea. She glanced past his shoulder and saw the women watching them with predatory interest, their eyes narrowing as if assessing a rare find. She didn't know why, but something in the tension of his posture, the stiffness of his shoulders, the slight tremor at the corner of his mouth pushed past her instinct to flee. He didn't look like a man searching for attention. He looked like a man trying to escape it. Her voice came out softer than she expected. "What do you need me to do?" Relief washed over his face so quickly it startled her. He dipped his head with a grateful breath, then stepped just slightly to the side, giving her the space to move if she chose, though the desperation in his expression made it clear he hoped she wouldn't. "Just stand with me," he said quietly. "Talk to me. Like we've known each other all evening." Claire blinked, trying to piece together how she had become the lifeline of a man who looked as though he belonged on the cover of a business magazine. He had the kind of presence that filled a room broad-shouldered, dignified, his dark hair touched with the faintest silver near his temples, handsome in a way that felt out of reach for someone like her. But there was a tightness around his eyes, a flicker of something brittle. She forced out a shaky breath. "All right." Only then did he allow his shoulders to drop an inch, as if he had been bracing himself for her refusal. They stood side by side near the tall windows, the city of Portland sprawling beneath them in a glittering hush. Claire felt every inch of the borrowed dress hugging her in ways that made her self-conscious. She wasn't sure what to do with her hands, so she clasped them in front of her, hoping the soft fabric wouldn't wrinkle under her grip. The two approaching women slowed, exchanged glances, and turned away. Whatever plan they had had for the man beside her had clearly been interrupted. Claire let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Do you mind telling me what that was about?" He hesitated, eyes following the retreating women, then looked back at her with the faintest flicker of embarrassment. "They have been trying to introduce me to someone all evening. Several someones, actually, and I needed a break." Claire nodded slowly. "You could have just said no." "I tried." His lips curved in a humorless smile, repeatedly. She studied him, feeling a strange mixture of amusement and empathy. Whoever he was, he didn't seem comfortable here, not in the way everyone else glided across the floor with practiced elegance. He looked like a man used to stages he didn't ask for. "I'm Michael, by the way," he said, offering a small, careful smile. "Michael Barrett. The name stirred vague recognition local business articles. Maybe something about construction or development in the city. But Claire kept that to herself. She nodded politely. Claire Dawson. Claire, he repeated, as if anchoring himself with the sound of her name. Thank you. I didn't know who else to ask. She lifted a brow. And I looked like an easy target. His eyes widened slightly. No, that's not. He exhaled. You just looked like someone who wasn't trying to impress anyone. Claire wasn't sure if that was meant as a compliment, but something in the sincerity of his voice softened her response. Well, she said gently, you were right about that. Michael glanced away, running a hand across the back of his neck, and Claire noticed for the first time the faint tremor of exhaustion there. Not physical, but emotional. The kind that settled deep in the bones. Are you all right? She asked before she could stop herself. He gave a soft laugh, more breath than sound. Not tonight, apparently. A beat of silence stretched between them. Claire tried to ignore the sharp contrast between her reflection and his, in the glass her simple dress. Her hair pinned quickly before arriving. The faint trace of flour near her wrist she hadn't noticed earlier. She wondered what he saw standing beside him. A stranger he had pulled into his orbit out of convenience, or someone safer than the people who circled him with practiced smiles before she could find her footing again. He reached out, touching her elbow lightly. The contact was barely there, gentle, respectful, but it sent a warm jolt through her. Not of romance, not yet, but of something human, something real. Just stay with me for another minute, he said quietly. I need a moment to breathe. And for the first time that night, Claire noticed the flicker of pain behind his composed facade, the kind of pain no amount of wealth or charm could hide. She nodded, unsure why she felt suddenly protective of a man she barely knew. Okay, I'll stay. As he exhaled, shoulders easing the slightest bit, Claire wondered what weight he carried behind that polished suit and why he had chosen her, of all people, to help him carry it, even for a moment. Claire had spent the afternoon wiping flour off her arms, not preparing for a room full of millionaires. The scent of cinnamon had clung to her sweater even after she changed, and when she left the bakery at 5, her back still throbbed from lifting trays heavier than she liked to admit. She had rushed home, showered quickly, and stared at the borrowed dress draped over her bed as if it belonged to another woman, someone who had time for hair appointments, someone who didn't fall asleep on the couch with the TV humming softly in the background. She had almost canceled twice. Once while searching for shoes that didn't pinch her toes, and again when she realized her only pair of earrings had mismatched backs. But her cousin Hannah had insisted, reminding her it was a charity gala, not a blind date. You need to get out, Hannah had said over the phone, chewing gum loudly. Talk to people, make new connections. You can't live inside that bakery for the rest of your life. Claire had smiled, though it had felt thin. People said that easily when they didn't understand how much effort it took just to keep the doors open. The bakery had been her refuge for nearly 6 years, and her responsibility alone for the last 2. When her marriage dissolved, she had kept the shop and he had kept the house. Some days she felt grateful for the trade. Other days, when the oven groaned and threatened to die, she wondered if she should have fought harder. The bills felt heavier now. Supplies cost more every month, and the old mixer rattled so loudly she sometimes worried it would fling itself off the counter in protest. By the time she reached her small apartment, she felt the weight of everything: the work, the loneliness, the birthdays spent with customers instead of friends, the quiet dinners eaten standing at the kitchen counter. She changed slowly, trying not to let her reflection in the bathroom mirror discourage her. It's just one night, she had whispered to herself. Smile, stay an hour, then leave, driving to the event. She kept the window cracked despite the November chill. The cold helped her stay awake, helped her stay focused instead of spiraling into the same tired thoughts that she was running in place, that she was too old to start over, that life had already shown her the width of its kindness and she shouldn't expect more. When she pulled into the parking lot of the downtown hotel, she sat still for a moment with her hands resting on the steering wheel. The hotel entrance glowed under strings of warm lights, and guests stepped out of large SUVs and polished sedans, men in tailored suits, women in jewel-toned dresses that shimmered with each step. Their laughter carried across the pavement, light and effortless. Claire felt her throat tighten. She touched her hair, smoothing back a strand that refused to stay put. Her dress, borrowed from Hannah, felt too fitted in some places and too loose in others. She wondered, not for the first time, how a person could feel both invisible and out of place at the same time. She released a long breath. "You don't have to stay," she murmured. "You don't owe anyone anything." Her hand moved toward the ignition, ready to turn it, ready to go home, change into pajamas, heat up leftover soup, and forget she had ever tried to step into a world that didn't include her. But then she saw them. An elderly couple stepped from a dark blue SUV, the man in a simple black suit, the woman wrapped in a silver shawl. They weren't glamorous like the others. They moved slowly, carefully. Yet the way he reached for her hand, the way she leaned into him with a tired smile, sent a sudden ache through Claire's chest. A small, solid reminder of a kind of closeness she had lost years ago, of something she still missed even when she pretended she didn't. The woman's hand rested on the man's forearm as he helped her over the curb. Claire found herself watching them longer than she intended. That simple gesture, tender and familiar, rooted her in place. She pulled her hand back from the ignition. Maybe she wasn't ready to go home just yet. Maybe an hour wouldn't hurt. She climbed out of her car, tugging at the hem of her dress. The cold air pinched her cheeks as she crossed the parking lot. And for a moment, she almost turned around again, just one simple pivot back towards safety. But the doors were already opening for another group, and she was swept behind them, carried into the warm, bright swell of voices. Inside, the ballroom was overwhelmingly elegant, soft gold lighting draped over crystal glasses and polished tables, over carefully arranged floral centerpieces that probably cost more than a week of her bakery's sales. A jazz trio played near the stage, the music smooth and steady. People moved through the room with practiced ease, smiling as if their lives had no sharp edges. Claire forced a small smile of her own, but she felt the weight of her quiet, flower-dusted life pressing against the edges of this glittering world. Her cousin greeted her briefly before disappearing into a cluster of acquaintances. Claire wandered near the walls, hoping no one would ask her where she worked, what she drove, or why she had come alone. As she reached for a glass of sparkling cider, her back tightened sharply. She winced, placing a hand at the small of her spine. Years of lifting bags of flour and bending over ovens had carved little reminders into her body, reminders she carried even on nights like this when she wished she didn't. She considered leaving again. This time, she meant it. She took a step toward the exit, her heart lifting at the thought of fresh air. Then a voice behind her said softly, "Please, pretend you're with me." The same voice that had frozen her earlier. The same urgency she hadn't understood. The same man who would, in a few breathless seconds, pull her out of her escape route and deeper into a night she never meant to live. And as Claire turned toward him, startled, her earlier question pulsed through her again. Why hadn't she just driven home? They moved toward the far corner of the ballroom, where the city lights looked softer, almost kinder, than the faces around them. Claire felt the noise fade with each step, replaced by the steady hum of her own heartbeat. The tall windows stretched from the floor to ceiling, reflecting the two of them in long, wavering silhouettes. It almost looked like they were standing closer than they actually were, two figures suspended in the glow of downtown Portland. Michael stopped a few feet from the glass, releasing a breath that seemed too heavy for someone dressed so impeccably. She noticed the tiny shift in his shoulders, the way tension slowly bled from them, as if he'd been carrying it all evening. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I shouldn't have pulled you into this." Claire shook her head. "It's all right. You looked cornered." A tired smile flickered across his face. "That's one word for it." He leaned his hand lightly on the edge of the window frame, but didn't turn fully toward her, as if unsure how much space he was allowed to take up. "They mean well," he said after a moment. My late wife's mother, her friends, they think they're helping. His voice dipped softer, as though it hurt to say the words aloud. But it's been 4 years, and still, I feel like I'm on display every time I show up somewhere. Claire watched the reflection of his profile in the glass. In the ballroom's warm light, his face looked older than she expected, not in a tired or worn-out way, but in the way someone looked when life had pressed too hard for too long. I imagine people have a lot of opinions about what you should be doing, she murmured. His laugh was hollow. Everyone seems to know what I need, except me. She understood that far more than she wanted to admit. He continued. Tonight, they were trying to introduce me to someone they thought would be a good match. His jaw tightened the slightest bit. I couldn't breathe. Then I saw you heading for the door, and you looked like the only person here who wasn't trying to play a part. Claire's cheeks warmed. I was trying to leave. And that made you the safest person in the room. The honesty in his tone startled her. She found herself looking at her reflection instead of him, a woman in a pink dress that didn't quite fit, hair pinned too hastily, clutch held too tightly. She didn't feel like a safe person. She felt like someone who didn't belong at all. But somehow, his words made her feel steadier. She shifted slightly, turning toward him. Why not just tell them no? Not tonight, he laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. I've said no so many times they treat it like background noise. Eventually I just run out of ways to push back. The admission settled heavily in the air. Claire thought of her own long list of silent battles, expectations she never met. Moments when people assumed she was fine because she didn't make noise about the things that hurt. I get that, she said softly. Sometimes it's easier to pretend than to explain. Michael finally looked fully at her, his expression sharpening with faint surprise. You do. She nodded, eyes drifting back to the gleaming dance floor. People think being alone means you're free, but sometimes it just means you're not chosen, not asked, not considered. She swallowed, wishing she hadn't said so much. It's easier to let people assume what they want. A pause stretched between them, warm and fragile. He turned back toward the window. I think that's what exhausts me the most, he said. Pretending. Acting like I'm okay so everyone else can feel comfortable. His fingers pressed lightly against the glass, as if grounding himself. I miss being seen. Not as a widower, not as the guy who's finally ready to move on, but just seen. Claire's breath caught. She knew that feeling too closely, too intimately. She studied his reflection again, the broad shoulders, the careful posture, the faint stubble along his jaw. He looked like the kind of man people expected strength from every second of every day. But here, in this quiet corner, he looked human. I'm sorry, he murmured suddenly. I shouldn't unload this on you. You don't know me. That's true, she said gently. But you're not unloading. You're being honest. There's a difference. Michael blinked, as if the distinction had never occurred to him. Her voice was quiet, hesitant. Maybe you needed someone who didn't come here with any expectations. Someone who wasn't already trying to decide your future. He looked at her again, and for a moment, the noise of the ballroom dimmed, until all Claire could hear was the low hum of the city beyond the glass. The lights outside flickered across his eyes, softening them, making them seem warmer. I did, he said. His voice cracked on the last word, small and unsteady, as if honesty cost him something. More than I realized. The sincerity of it struck her so unexpected that she felt the breath leave her lungs. Something about the way he said it made her chest tighten in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. She didn't know what to say, so she simply stood there, letting the moment settle. He straightened slightly, drawing a slow breath, trying to gather himself. Thank you. Claire. Her name and his voice made something flutter unexpectedly beneath her ribs. She forced herself to meet his eyes, even as a warmth crept up her neck. You're welcome, she managed. They stood side by side, watching their reflections merge briefly in the window's sheen, the city lights wrapping them in a soft glow, Claire felt something unfamiliar move inside her, like a memory of closeness she hadn't let herself feel in years. And yet, this wasn't a memory. She didn't know this man. He didn't know her. So, why did this conversation feel like they were remembering something instead of learning it? The question hung inside her, unsettling and strangely comforting all at once. "How do you learn to start over?" he asked. The question slipped out of him before he seemed ready for it, hanging in the space between them like something too delicate to touch. Claire felt it land inside her chest, quiet but heavy, as if he had unknowingly echoed a thought she'd carried for years. They had moved to a tall, high-top table near the ballroom's edge, a small island of calm in a sea of polished conversation. From here, Claire could see the sweep of gowns, hear the rise and fall of light laughter, but everything felt muted, as though the world had stepped a few feet away to give them room. Michael's eyes stayed on the table as he spoke, tracing the rim of his glass with one finger. "I mean, people talk like it's a switch you flip. One day you're grieving, the next day you're ready to build something new. I've never understood how that's supposed to work." Claire swallowed, unsure how much of her own truth to give. But the question felt too honest to ignore. "I don't think it works that way," she said softly. "I think you wake up one morning and realize the life you were holding on to isn't coming back, and you either keep pretending or you try to move forward, even if you don't know how." He lifted his eyes, something raw flickering in them. "Did you?" Her fingers tightened around her clutch. She hadn't planned to talk about her past tonight. She hadn't planned to talk to anyone at all. But something about the quiet in his face, something about the unguarded way he waited, made the truth easier to say. "My marriage ended 2 years ago," she said. "There wasn't a fight, no betrayal, just two people who stopped reaching for each other. We kept trying to fix something that had already cracked too deeply." She offered a small, almost apologetic smile. When it finally ended, no one understood why it hurt so much, because nothing dramatic had happened. But sometimes the quiet endings are the ones that stay with you. He exhaled slowly, like the words settled into him. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "That sounds lonely." "It was," she admitted. "Still is sometimes." He nodded, gaze dropping again. For a moment she thought he would pull back, guard himself, end the conversation gently. But instead, he spoke with a vulnerability so bare it startled her. "My wife passed 4 years ago," he said. "Car accident. Lily was 8 then." His voice tightened almost imperceptibly. "She's 12 now. She's brilliant. She's strong. But I worry I'm failing her. I work long hours. I try to be present, but—" He shook his head. "Some days I feel like I'm pretending at fatherhood, the way I pretend through events like this." Claire's breath softened. She imagined a little girl, hair in messy braids, waiting at a kitchen table for a father, trying to be 2 people at once. "I'm sure she sees more than you think," she said. "Kids have a way of noticing when someone loves them." He looked at her, then really looked as if her words touched a place he didn't show anyone. Something warm and unsettled stirred inside her. She shouldn't have felt it. Not for a man she'd known for less than an hour. Not for someone still carrying the weight of another love. Her eyes dropped to the table, to the narrow space between their hands, his resting just inches from hers, not touching, but close enough that she felt the pull anyway. Quiet and uninvited. He cleared his throat, seeming almost embarrassed by how much he'd shared. "I don't usually talk like this." "I don't either," she replied. It made them both smile, small, cautious things that felt like stepping out onto a thin sheet of ice together. He took a sip of water, then set the glass down a little too quickly. "I'm sorry if this is too heavy." "It's not," she said. "Sometimes strangers are easier to talk to. They don't know the version of you you're supposed to be." "Is that how you see me?" His tone was gentle, curious. Claire hesitated. "I see someone trying very hard to hold himself together." A soft huff of laughter escaped him, unexpected, warm, genuine. It loosened something in her chest. His shoulders eased, his eyes brightened just a little. And for the first time tonight, He looked like a man her age rather than a figure carved from responsibility. "I haven't laughed like that in months," he said. She felt the words more deeply than she meant to. A fragile ache pressed beneath her ribs, the kind that came from recognizing a connection she hadn't asked for. For a moment, they simply stood there. The ballroom noise felt further away, the city lights softer, the air thicker between them. Claire felt a pull she didn't trust, a gentle, dangerous thing urging her towards someone she had no business leaning into. Michael straightened, as if suddenly aware of the same shift. "I should let you get back to your evening." She let out a faint breath. "I wasn't really part of it to begin with." They shared a small smile, one that lingered just a second longer than politeness required. Her hand touched the edge of her clutch, a nervous habit. "I guess I'll head out now." He nodded, but there was something unfinished in the way he looked at her, something that made her pulse catch. She turned slightly, preparing to take a step away, but her feet didn't move. Why did goodbye feel heavier than the moment they met? The question clung to her as if the room itself whispered it, waiting to see what she would do next. Claire drove through the cool Portland night with the strange ache of being seen. The streetlights drifted over her windshield in slow pulses, each one revealing the faint shimmer of the ballroom still clinging to her dress. She tightened her hands on the steering wheel. It was ridiculous a man she'd spoken to for less than an hour shouldn't have left this kind of echo. But he had. Michael's voice, low and steady, kept replaying in her mind. The softness that crept in when he mentioned his daughter. The roughness when he admitted he felt like he was failing. The quiet laugh he didn't seem to know he still had in him. She could feel each moment nudging at something she'd tried to keep dormant, the part of herself that wanted to be known again. Her small sedan rolled to a stop at a red light. A couple crossed in front of her, arms linked, walking slowly as if the night itself were holding them. The sight made her chest tighten. She looked away too quickly, as if the image embarrassed her. "Get a grip," she whispered, tapping her thumb against the steering wheel. It was just a conversation, nothing more, nothing she should read into. And yet, the light turned green, but she waited half a second longer before pressing the gas, giving herself a little more time in the quiet. Across the city, standing just outside the entrance of the hotel, Michael watched her taillights disappear down the wide, tree-lined avenue. He'd told himself he would walk back inside, endure a few more goodbyes, then head home. But the moment she stepped away, something unsettled in him, the lingering sense of having opened a door he thought had rusted shut. He wasn't sure what startled him more, how natural the conversation had felt, or how much he'd wanted it to continue. A valet approached him, asking if he needed his car pulled up. Michael shook his head. His eyes remained fixed on where Claire's car had vanished. For a moment, a familiar heaviness pressed into his chest, the kind that came every time he accidentally reached for a future where his wife still existed. But tonight, something inside that heaviness shifted, almost imperceptibly, like a window cracked open in a long, closed room. He turned back toward the hotel, but he didn't go in. Claire pulled into her apartment complex, feeling the familiar crunch of gravel under her tires. The building was quiet, a long, 3-story structure with aging siding and staircases that moaned in the winter. She parked in her numbered spot, but didn't reach for the door. Instead, she sat there, hands resting in her lap, listening to the slowing tick of her engine. Why him? She murmured to no one. Why tonight? It wasn't romantic. She wasn't foolish enough to believe that. It wasn't even attraction, not in the simple sense. It was something quieter. The recognition of being understood, however briefly, by someone who didn't expect anything from her. Her phone buzzed in her purse. She ignored it for the moment, unbuckled her seatbelt, and stepped out into the cool night. The air smelled faintly of pine from the row of trees edging the lot. She climbed the stairs to her unit and unlocked the door. Inside, her apartment welcomed her with its smallness. One bedroom, a narrow living room, a kitchen just wide enough for one person to stand in. She normally found comfort in its modest simplicity. Tonight, she felt its emptiness instead. She set her clutch on the counter and glanced at her reflection in the dark microwave door. Her hair was still pinned neatly at the sides, though a few strands had softened around her face. Her dress, though borrowed, still held the warmth of the ballroom lights. She didn't look wealthy, glamorous, or particularly striking, but she didn't look invisible either. Her purse buzzed again. She pulled her phone out and saw the missed notification, a group message from her cousin, sending photos of everyone at the gala. Claire didn't open it. She set the phone aside and moved to her bedroom. She sat on the edge of her bed, dress still on, back straight, palms resting gently on the comforter. The lamp on her nightstand cast a soft amber light, catching the faint shimmer on her sleeves. She lifted her gaze to the mirror across the room. She hardly recognized the woman looking back. The reflection wasn't younger, or prettier, or transformed in any dramatic way, but there was something different in her eyes, a light she hadn't seen in years, a question she didn't know how to answer. She closed her eyes for a moment, drawing in a slow breath. Was that real, she whispered, or just loneliness dressed up as connection? The phone buzzed again this time, with a softer, single vibration. A text. She reached for it, intending to ignore it again, but her thumb hesitated. The number was unfamiliar. Her breath caught. She opened the message. "Thank you for treating me like a real person tonight." Michael Claire's pulse slowed, then deepened in her chest. A warm ache bloomed beneath her ribs, quiet but unmistakable. She stared at the message for several long seconds, the room holding its breath with her. She set the phone in her lap, thumbs hovering just above the screen, unsure whether to type or to turn it face down and pretend none of this tugged at her. The night felt still around her, too still. Should she answer? The bell above the bakery door chimed a bright, familiar sound, but it carried a weight Claire hadn't heard in it before. She looked up from the tray of cooling cinnamon rolls, ready to greet a customer the way she had 100 mornings before. But when she saw him standing there, framed by the warm glow of her shop, she felt her breath pause. Michael Barrett didn't belong in a place full of old wooden shelves and mismatched tables. His crisp button-down shirt and the careful way he held himself looked more suited to corner offices and polished conference rooms. Yet there he was, standing just inside her doorway, as if unsure whether he was meant to step further. And beside him stood a girl 12, maybe narrow-shouldered, with dark hair falling down her back in loose waves. She held a sketchbook to her chest and looked around the bakery with wide, curious eyes. Claire wiped her hands on her apron, suddenly aware of the flour smudges she hadn't noticed earlier. "You came," she said, before she could soften the words into something calmer. Michael's expression eased into something warm. "I told you I would." He stepped in fully now, guiding the girl beside him. "This is my daughter, Lily." The girl offered a shy smile. Hi, Lily," Claire said gently, lowering her voice the way she did when speaking to children who were still deciding whether the world was safe. "I'm glad you're here." Lily's eyes drifted to the display case with an almost reverent curiosity. "It smells like Christmas in here." Claire laughed softly. "That might be the cinnamon rolls. They just came out of the oven." Michael placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder, not possessive but steady, as if grounding both of them. "She's been asking if we could stop by. I guess I gave too many descriptions of your pastries. I wanted to see the place where you met her," Lily said matter-of-factly. He cleared his throat, as if surprised she'd said it so plainly. Claire pretended not to notice his faint blush. She stepped around the counter. "Would you like to help me frost some cupcakes? I have a batch cooling in the back." Lily's face brightened. "Can I?" "If it's okay with your dad," Claire said. Michael nodded. "If you want to, but don't feel you have to help." "Honey, I want to," she said quickly. Claire led her to the small prep table behind the counter. Lily climbed onto a step stool, her small sneakers tapping lightly against the wooden legs. Sunlight filtered through the front windows, catching dust motes that danced lazily in the air. Claire placed a piping bag in Lily's hands. "Here, squeeze gently. Try for a little star." Lily pressed too hard at first, a burst of frosting splattering unevenly onto the cupcake. She froze, embarrassed. Claire touched the girl's wrist lightly. "That's okay. Try again. Slow this time." Lily took a breath, steadier now, and squeezed. A small, wobbly star appeared, then another. The pride warming the girl's face made Claire smile. Michael watched from a nearby table. He wasn't smiling widely. He didn't seem like someone who ever let his emotions spill too far, but something in his shoulders softened. The tension he wore like a second skin eased just a bit as he watched his daughter, and Claire felt the shift like a change in temperature. She glanced at him briefly. His eyes met hers. For a heartbeat, she forgot the frosting in her hands. Lily continued decorating in careful concentration. "Dad," she said, without looking up. "Yes, can we make these at home, if Miss Claire doesn't mind sharing her recipe?" Claire shook her head. "I'd be happy to." Lily smiled down at her cupcake. "They're prettier here." Claire swallowed a small laugh. "Things look different when you're proud of them." As Lily returned to her task, Michael lowered his voice. "She doesn't usually warm up to new people this quickly." Claire kept her eyes on the tray of cupcakes. "She just needs someone patient with her, or someone who sees her," he murmured. The words lingered in the air until she felt the heat rise to her cheeks. She focused on Lily, piping another star, crooked, imperfect, adorable. The girl was quiet, but not withdrawn, observant in a thoughtful way. It struck Claire how much of Michael she saw in her, especially in the careful way she approached everything. After a few minutes, Lily leaned toward Claire and whispered, "Daddy smiles more when you're around." Claire's hands stilled, a warmth spread beneath her ribs, tender and frightening. "Does he?" Lily nodded, confident. "He gets this look, like he's remembering something good." Claire didn't know what to do with that. She didn't want to assume too much. She didn't want to step into a space she wasn't invited into. But the weight of the child's words stayed with her, settling softly over her shoulders. Michael approached, unaware of what had just been said. "How's it going back here?" Lily lifted a cupcake proudly. Frosting stars leaned precariously across the top. "Beautiful," he said softly. "Just beautiful." He brushed a piece of hair from his daughter's face, then glanced at Claire again just for a second, but long enough that she felt something shift inside her. She turned back to the counter, trying to appear busy. It wasn't that she felt uncomfortable. It was something closer to being unsteady on new legs. As she handed Lily another cupcake, she wondered quietly, carefully, whether she was stepping too close to something she wasn't prepared to hold. Was she ready for the weight of someone else's grief? Was she ready for the weight of someone else's child looking at her like she was safe? She wasn't sure. And yet, when she glanced at Michael again, the question didn't feel simple anymore. The days began to change, shape measured not by orders or oven timers, but by when Michael would stop by. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't planned. But Claire felt it each morning when she unlocked the bakery door, a quiet anticipation that hovered just beneath her breath. Sometimes he arrived early, before the sun had fully lifted over the rooftops, the air still cold enough to fog the front windows. Other times, he came after work, tie loosened, exhaustion written in the set of his shoulders until he caught sight of her, and it eased just a little. And then there were the days Lily came too, carrying her sketchbook and a new idea for cupcake designs that ranged from whimsical to entirely impractical. Claire loved every one of them, a rhythm formed gentle, unspoken, dangerously comforting. One late afternoon, Claire stood on her tiptoes trying to force a stubborn cabinet door to close. The hinge had been loose for months, but she'd learned to live with it like she did with so many things in her life. A small imperfection in a long list of small imperfections. "It's going to fall off if you push it like that," Michael said as he walked in. She startled, then laughed. "Well, hello to you too." He stepped behind the counter without hesitation, as if he belonged there. "Where's your toolkit?" "I don't have one," she admitted. "You own a bakery and you don't have a toolkit." "I bake, Michael. I don't build furniture." He gave her a look, gentle, amused, and then excused himself. A few minutes later, he returned from his truck carrying a small metal box filled with tools that looked well used. "Move aside," he said. "Yes, sir," she teased, stepping back. He crouched, inspecting the hinge. She watched him quietly, the way he focused, the way his hands moved with certainty. Something about it warmed her more than she expected. "You know," she said, "most men your age just replace things when they break." "Most men my age," he replied, tightening a screw, "don't know how to fix anything anymore." The cabinet clicked shut smoothly. Claire blinked. "You did that in 30 seconds? 35, he corrected, grinning. She shook her head, but she felt that familiar stirring low in her chest, the one she tried not to name. Later that week, the bakery's overhead light began flickering. Claire dragged over an old stool, but before she could climb it, Michael walked in again, almost as if the place called him. "You're not getting on that," he said firmly. "That stool's older than both of us." "It's sturdy," she insisted. "It's swaying," he pointed out. He grabbed a ladder from the back storage room, one he'd found during a previous visit and declared unsafe until he repaired it. Once it was steady, he climbed up to inspect the light. Claire stood beneath him, unsure whether she was supposed to hold the ladder or simply keep him company. She chose the ladder, folding her arms loosely, gazing up at him. He wasn't a flashy man. His shirts weren't expensive. His hands always had faint traces of his work scratches, calluses, small cuts. But when she watched him replace the bulb, sleeves rolled to his elbows, she felt the kind of admiration that didn't announce itself. It simply settled, warm and steady. As he climbed down, he misjudged the last step and slipped. Claire reached out instinctively, her hands gripping his arm. He steadied quickly. "I'm fine," he said, breathless. "I know," she replied, though her pulse was not. Their eyes met briefly, too long, too bare. She was the first to look away. That weekend, Lily spent an afternoon at the bakery, experimenting with piping bags while Claire mixed batter. The girls' laughter filled the room, light, bright, like something breakable mended. "Try this one," Claire said, passing her a bag of lemon frosting. Lily squeezed too hard, frosting exploding in a messy starburst across the counter. She gasped. Claire burst into laughter. Lily followed, giggling so hard she nearly dropped the bag. Michael watched from the corner table, leaning back slightly, a softness in his expression that Claire tried not to read too deeply. But she saw it, the way his gaze settled on the two of them, not with longing, but with quiet gratitude, as if some long-emptied place inside him was filling again. There was a moment, small, fleeting, when Claire turned and caught his eyes. It held her still. It told her he knew exactly how natural all this felt, and that he was just as afraid of that truth as she was. Later, after Lily washed her hands and returned to her sketchbook, Claire found herself alone with him near the counter. The bakery felt warmer in the late afternoon light, the hum of the refrigerators steady in the background. "Thank you," Michael said quietly, "for what she asked, for making her happy, for making this place feel." He searched for the word, but didn't finish the sentence. She waited, heart thudding softly. He cleared his throat. "I forget it." "No," she said, gently. "Say it." He looked at her, and for a moment she thought he might. The air felt charged, the kind of moment she knew she'd remember, regardless of what happened next. But then he dropped his gaze. "I don't want to ruin anything." Her breath tightened. "You're not..." He nodded, though he didn't seem convinced. She watched him for another second, a question forming silently on her tongue. But she didn't ask it. She wasn't sure she was ready for the answer. He looked like he wasn't ready either. The rhythm they'd built, soft, warm, familiar, held steady for now. But beneath it, something was shifting, something small, something growing, something neither one of them dared name yet. And Claire couldn't help wondering what would finally break their hesitation. The Barrett house was the kind of place where silence echoed more loudly than conversation. Claire stepped through the front door and felt it immediately, the stillness, the immaculate order, the faint scent of lemon polish that reminded her of places where nothing was ever out of place, including a person's flaws. Michael greeted her with a warm smile, but she noticed the slight tension in his shoulders. "You made it," he said, as if he hadn't been certain she would. "I told you I would try," she whispered, forcing a smile. She held her coat close around her for a moment before handing it to him. It felt like armor she wasn't ready to take off. He brushed her hand lightly as he took it, and she felt a brief, steadying warmth. But then she heard footsteps behind them, soft, measured, unmistakably purposeful. Evelyn Barrett appeared at the end of the hallway, her posture straight, her silver hair pulled back neatly, a string of pearls resting against her collarbone. Her eyes swept over Claire with the quiet precision of someone accustomed to evaluating people in a single glance. "And you must be Claire," Evelyn said, her voice polite enough to hide the judgment beneath it. "Yes," Claire replied. "Thank you for inviting me." A slight nod. Not warm, not welcoming, just acknowledgement. Claire followed Michael into the dining room, her heels tapping softly against the hardwood floor. The house was beautiful, too beautiful, she thought. Wide windows framed the twilight, and a long oak table stretched across the room like something meant for magazine spreads, not meals. Lily sat at one end, swinging her feet lightly. She brightened when she saw Claire. "You came, I promised I would," Claire said, sliding into the chair beside her. The moment felt safe, just for a breath. Then Evelyn took her place at the head of the table. Dinner began with a kind of elegant choreography, dishes handed carefully, polite comments exchanged, silverware lifted in quiet unison. Claire felt herself stiffen with each minute that passed. She kept smoothing her napkin, folding and refolding it under the table like it might anchor her. "So, Claire," Evelyn began, her tone smooth. "Michael tells me you run a bakery. It's small," Claire said, "but it keeps me busy." "What sort of bakery? Custom pastries?" Wedding cakes, Evelyn's question seemed innocuous, yet they carried an undercurrent Claire couldn't quite shake. "Mostly everyday items," Claire replied. "Breads, muffins, seasonal things. I do specialty orders sometimes." "I see." Evelyn cut a piece of chicken with precise strokes. "Must be exhausting work. Early mornings, long hours." Claire kept her voice steady. "It can be, but I love it, and it pays the bills." Evelyn arched a brow. Michael's fork clattered softly against his plate. "Mom, I'm simply asking," Evelyn said lightly. "Running a small business is admirable, but hardly stable, especially compared to what you had, Michael." Claire felt the words like a draft under her skin. She looked down, pretending to focus on her meal. Lily leaned closer to her and whispered, "Grandma likes people who wear suits." Claire almost laughed, but the breath got stuck halfway. "Where did you study?" Claire Evelyn continued. "Community college," Claire answered. "I learned pastry through apprenticeships." The single syllable carried more weight than the full sentence that followed. "A practical path, I suppose." Claire felt smaller with every passing moment. Each question was another layer stripped away: her education, her career, her world. And she could see how different they felt to Evelyn, who probably viewed success through a lens Claire had never even held. Michael set down his glass. "Mom." "Claire doesn't need to defend. I'm not asking her to defend anything," Evelyn said. "I'm simply trying to understand how she imagines fitting into our world." Claire's fingers tightened around the cloth napkin beneath the table. Her heart thudded in her chest, slow and heavy. She hadn't come here to prove anything. She hadn't come here to audition. Evelyn continued, her gaze steady, unblinking. "Do you truly believe you can fit into our world?" Claire. The room felt too warm suddenly, the chandelier lights too bright. Claire's throat tightened. She glanced at Michael, whose regret was written so clearly across his face that she felt a pang of guilt for being the cause of it. She opened her mouth, though she wasn't sure what would come out. Something firm, something apologetic, something honest, but nothing formed. Not yet. Her napkin lay crushed in her hand, and the question echoed again in her mind. Did she believe she could fit here did she even want to? She hadn't seen that blow coming, and now she wasn't sure how to stand back up from it. Claire opened her mouth, but it was Lily who spoke first. The girl pushed back her chair with a soft scrape, the kind that cut straight through the polite tension of the room. Her small hands trembled as she clutched the locket at her neck, the one she wore every day. Inside it was a picture of her mother, something Michael once mentioned only in fragments. "Grandma," Lily said, her voice higher than usual. "That's not fair." The room went still. Claire froze. Michael turned slowly toward his daughter. Evelyn blinked, clearly startled. "Lily, sweetheart, we're having a conversation with our guest?" "No," Lily said, shaking her head. You're talking at her." Claire felt her breath catch. She had never seen Lily like this small. Yes, but suddenly fierce in a way that didn't belong to her years. "I know you miss Mom," Lily continued, her fingers tightening around the locket. "But she wouldn't want you to talk to Claire like that." Evelyn straightened, her mask slipping just a fraction. "And what makes you think I was being unkind?" "Because Mom told me," Lily said, her voice trembling, "that kindness is the only thing people remember when everything else gets taken away." Claire's throat tightened. Michael's hand moved toward Lily, then stopped midway, as if he didn't want to interrupt something sacred. Lily kept going, her breaths quick, unsteady. "Dad has been sad for a long time." "You say you want him to be happy, but he smiles more around Claire than he has in years. I've seen it." Evelyn's jaw shifted barely, but enough. And Claire Lily turned to her, eyes shining with a mixture of loyalty and fear. "She doesn't pretend around us. She doesn't try to be someone else. Mom said real people matter more than fancy people." The last words broke slightly, not in disrespect, but in the fragile truth of a child trying to defend something she wasn't sure she understood yet. Claire felt something in her chest collapse and steady at the same time. Gratitude and guilt, heavy, conflicting, dangerous. She wasn't sure which one was stronger. "Lily," Claire whispered, "it's okay. You don't have to." "Yes, I do." Lily's voice cracked. "Because Mom isn't here to say it." Michael exhaled sharply, his face folding into something raw. He reached for Lily then, pulling her gently against his side. She clung to him, eyes wet but fierce. For several seconds, no one moved. Claire could feel Evelyn's gaze. Not sharp this time, not assessing, just uncertain. Evelyn's fingers tightened around her water glass, the only sign of tension she allowed. Her voice, when it came, was quieter than before. "Lily," she said, "your mother did value kindness, deeply." The girl nodded, sniffling. "And," Evelyn continued, her eyes flicking once toward Claire, "I may have reacted too quickly tonight." The words landed softly, but with weight, as if Evelyn wasn't used to admitting anything resembling fault. Michael stared at his mother, stunned enough not to speak. Claire swallowed, unsure how to respond. Was this acceptance a temporary truce or simply politeness forced by a child's trembling voice? Evelyn's posture remained poised, but something had undeniably shifted, cracked open by the memory of a woman they had all loved, and by the courage of a 12-year-old who refused to let her mother's gentleness fade. Claire's chest ached. A part of her wanted to reach for Lily, to comfort her, to say something reassuring. Another part whispered that she had no right, that she was stepping too close to something fragile, private. She folded her hands into her lap to stop herself from reaching out. Michael cleared his throat, rough with emotion. "Maybe," he said softly, "we should all take a breath." Evelyn nodded, almost imperceptibly. Lily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaning into her father's side, and Claire sat there, suspended in the quiet aftermath, unsure if she'd just been defended or placed in a role she could never live up to. The locket glimmered faintly in the chandelier light, catching Claire's eye again. She wondered, had she been welcomed, or had the room simply paused long enough for a deeper wound to show itself? Claire sat on the cold concrete steps behind the bakery, apron still on, tears streaking flour down her cheek. The night pressed close around her, a soft darkness broken only by the warm glow of the street lamp above. Her breaths came unevenly, small shivers rising as the cool air settled against her damp face. She hadn't meant to cry. Not here. Not after holding everything together through Evelyn's pointed questions, Lily's trembling courage, and Michael's stunned silence. But the minute she'd locked up the bakery and stepped out back, her body had given out like it had been waiting for permission. Her palms rested flat on the edge of the step. She felt the rough concrete under her fingertips, grounding her, reminding her that she still had her own life, her own small world, a world she understood, a world that felt safe. The Barretts, they were something else entirely. A tear slid down her jaw. She brushed it away impatiently. She didn't want to be a woman who cried over not belonging. She'd spent the past 2 years rebuilding herself from a divorce that had hollowed her out. She'd learned how to be alone without collapsing. She'd learned how to run a bakery even when she could barely pay herself. She'd learned how to stop missing being chosen. And now she was crying over a family dinner. Footsteps crunched on the gravel. Claire stiffened, wiping her face with the corner of her apron. "Please," she murmured to the darkness. Not now. But the steps kept coming, steady and certain. Michael emerged at the corner of the building. He wasn't wearing a coat, just a sweater and the same strained expression he had worn when she left his house. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd run his hands through it too many times. He stopped a few feet from her. "Your lights were still on," he said softly. "I wanted to make sure you got home okay." She looked down. "I'm fine." "You're crying." "I said I'm fine." The firmness in her voice broke somewhere in the middle of the sentence. Michael exhaled, slow, pained, and walked over to sit beside her. The step was narrow. Their shoulders brushed despite her attempt to give him space. For a long moment, neither spoke. A breeze pulled at the loose strands of hair around her face. She tucked them behind her ear, hoping the small movement looked steadier than she felt. "You shouldn't have to defend me," Claire finally said. "Not against your family, not against any of that." Michael stared at his hands. "You shouldn't have had to." The hum of a distant car drifted by. The bakery windows glowed faintly behind them, warm against the night. Claire swallowed. "I don't fit in your world," she whispered. "I don't fit in mine either," he answered quietly. She turned her head, startled. Michael's breath shook as he leaned forward, forearms resting on his knees. "People think because I kept the business running, because I take care of Lily, that I've somehow figured out how to move on. But I haven't. I've just learned how to avoid feeling too much at once." Claire didn't move. "I was married for 16 years, he continued. "I loved her. And losing her." His voice thinned. It changed everything I thought I was. Claire's chest tightened. She could hear the truth in him, heavy and unsteady. "I didn't ask for anything tonight," he said. "I didn't plan any of this. But when you walked into that ballroom, you looked like the only person who wasn't pretending. I don't know why, but I felt like I could breathe." She stared at the pavement. "You felt desperate." "I was," he admitted, "but it wasn't just desperation. I think I saw someone who was trying as hard as I was." Claire closed her eyes. It felt too close, too dangerous. "I can't be Lily's replacement mother," she said, voice breaking. "I can't step into someone else's shadow." Michael shook his head. "I'm not asking you to. And Lily, she wasn't defending you because she wants you to replace her mom. She defended you because you're kind, and she misses kindness." His words landed like a soft weight on her shoulder, warm, but heavy in all the places she'd been trying not to feel. Silence stretched. The street lamp above flickered once before steadying. Michael's voice lowered, as if he were afraid the night itself might judge him. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered. "I don't know how to love someone again without feeling like I'm betraying the past." He looked at her then, fully, openly, something unguarded flickering in his eyes. "But I want to try," he said, "with you." Claire felt her breath catch. a small, fragile thing trapped in her chest. She wasn't sure if it was fear or longing or both tangled together. The street lamp cast a small circle of light around them, softening the edges of the world. She could hear her own heartbeat, too loud, too vulnerable. She tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. Could she risk her heart again? Could she carry the weight of a grieving family? Could she trust that she wasn't simply soothing loneliness for him or for herself? When she finally managed a breath, it trembled, and Michael waited, his hands clasped tightly, as if bracing for whatever she might say next. Claire's hands trembled as she tied the last ribbon around a box of lemon shortbread, the pale yellow bow slipping once before settling into place. She stared at it for a quiet moment. It wasn't exhaustion that made her fingers unsteady. She had lived through far harder mornings. It was possibility, the kind she had avoided dreaming about for years. The bakery smelled like cinnamon and fresh paint, a strange but homey mix. New shelves lined the far wall, still gleaming. A row of pendant lights glowed warmly, their soft amber reflections stretching across the polished glass cases. She had spent half the night wiping every counter twice, adjusting the display trays until they looked effortless. Outside, a small crowd was already forming, neighbors, friends, familiar faces she had fed for years, and somewhere in the middle of it, Michael and Lily. She wasn't ready to see him, not after the way the air had shifted between them on the back steps 2 weeks ago. Quiet, intimate, trembling with unfinished sentences. They had seen each other since then, of course, but always with a carefulness that made her chest tighten. Something had changed, something had begun, and neither of them knew how to name it yet. The bell above the front door chimed. Claire blinked, inhaled, and stepped out from behind the counter. Michael stood there, holding a bundle of wildflowers Lily must have picked out. He wore a pressed shirt, nothing formal, but the kind that made him look younger, softer somehow. Lily hovered beside him, clutching the flowers as if they might float away. "You look," Michael paused, searching for the right word, like someone starting a new chapter. Claire's heart lifted and tightened all at once. "Thank you," she said, her voice gentler than she intended. Lily thrust the flowers forward. "We wanted you to have these before everyone else gets loud." Claire laughed softly. Taking them, "I appreciate the warning." Customers trickled in. Mr. Henderson from next door, the retired teacher who always asked for extra butter, the elderly sisters who insisted Claire's coffee cake tasted better than their mother's, a handful of teenagers who had adopted the bakery as their after-school spot. The space filled with warm voices and the rhythmic hush of footsteps on worn wooden floors. Claire moved among them with practiced ease, but her eyes kept drifting toward Michael, and every time she looked, he was already watching her, never intrusive, just present, grounding, as if he was afraid she might float away with all the attention. Near noon, Claire excused herself to refill the coffee urn. When she returned, she saw Michael standing near the center of the bakery, clearing his throat. "Excuse me, everyone," he said, and the room stilled in that uneven, imperfect way gatherings often do. Claire froze. This was not part of the plan. Michael held a small note card, but his hands seemed to forget it was there. "Most of you know Claire," he began, his voice steady but carrying something tender underneath. "Some of you have been here from the day she opened her doors. Some of you have known her even longer." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. "But what you might not know," he continued, looking straight at her, "is how much she's built on her own, how much she's carried quietly, how much she gives this community, even on days when she has little left to give herself." Claire felt a flush rise to her cheeks. Her fingers dug lightly into the edge of the counter. "She didn't ask for help expanding this place," Michael said. "She didn't even want to. She thought it was too much to hope for, too much to risk." His voice softened, and maybe she was right. Dreams can be risky, but sometimes the risk is the only way back to yourself. He set the note card aside, unread. Lily stepped closer to her father, her small hand slipping into his. Michael took a breath, a deep one, the kind a person takes when every word that follows might change something important. "Claire," he said, his voice barely above the hum of the pendant lights. "You brought laughter back into my daughter's life. You brought peace back into mine. You made me remember that kindness isn't weakness, that healing doesn't always look the way you expect." Claire's throat tightened. She didn't dare move. Michael walked forward slowly, the crowd parting around him. When he reached her, he held out a small velvet box, not flashy, not ornate, just simple, like something chosen with intention rather than show. Her breath caught. He opened it. A single gold band gleamed inside, understated and warm, reflecting the bakery lights. "I don't have the perfect words," he said. "I don't even have perfect timing. But I know this. I want to build a life with you, one that feels real, one that feels steady, one that gives us all a chance to grow again." Her heartbeat thudded painfully against her ribs. "I love you, Claire," he said quietly. "I want to stand beside you in everything that comes next. Will you marry me?" The room-blurred faces softening, Lily's bright eyes shining, the smell of cinnamon rising around her like a memory of safety. The world felt impossibly near and impossibly fragile. Claire opened her lips, but before sound could form, her breath trembled. She wasn't sure if it was joy pushing at her ribs or fear of losing something beautiful, fear of being unprepared, fear of stepping into a life that could break her open all over again. Her gaze lowered to the simple ring, then to Michael's waiting hand. Her heart leaned forward, but her fear tugged back, and the whole room seemed to hold its breath as she stood suspended between everything she'd lost and everything she might still gain. Claire didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her breath hitched, her lips trembled, and then before she even realized she was moving, she nodded, a small, raw, unguarded nod that broke whatever dam she'd been holding inside. Tears spilled down her cheeks, warm against the cool bakery air. Michael's shoulders sagged with something like relief and awe all at once. For a moment, he didn't move, almost as if he didn't trust what he'd just seen. Then, he closed the small velvet box, set it gently aside, and took both her hands in his. "You're sure?" he whispered. She nodded again, a firmer, steadier yes this time. A soft sound came from the side. Lily, unable to stay still another second, covered her mouth with both hands as tears streamed freely down her face. She rushed forward and wrapped her arms around Claire's waist before Claire could brace herself. "I'm so happy," the girl sobbed. "I'm just so happy." Claire held her tight, her body shaking with the kind of joy that felt almost too big for her chest. She smoothed Lily's hair, breathed in the faint scent of vanilla the girl always carried, and felt something inside her settle, as if a piece she hadn't realized was missing had finally found its place. Then, unexpectedly, gently another pair of arms wrapped around her from the side. Evelyn. The embrace wasn't long, it wasn't dramatic, it was simply firm, sincere, warm in a way that startled Claire into stillness. "Welcome," Evelyn said softly when she pulled back. "Truly." Claire couldn't speak. She didn't know how to hold so much emotion at once, but she nodded, blinking back a fresh wave of tears. Around them, the bakery seemed to glow brighter. The pendant lights shimmered like softened stars. Customers who had witnessed the moment clapped quietly, as if afraid to break the fragile sweetness of it. Michael reached for the box again, his fingers steady now. He opened it and slipped the ring onto her finger. The gold caught the warm light, gleaming like a promise she hadn't dared imagine for herself. It felt surprisingly light, surprisingly right. Michael brushed a thumb across the back of her hand. "This is real, Claire, as real as it gets." A laugh broke from her chest, breathy, half sobbing. "I know," she whispered, "and I'm ready for this. For us." The words left her mouth before doubt had a chance to interrupt, and once they were out, she realized how true they were. She was ready. Ready to stop carrying her life alone. Ready to stop believing that stability meant staying small. Ready to trust the man who had shown her more gentleness in a few months than she'd given herself in years. Michael cupped the side of her face, his thumb catching a tear before it fell. "You make me feel alive again," he murmured. "I didn't think that was possible anymore." Claire leaned into his touch, her heartbeat finally slowing. "You made me believe in possibility again," she said. "I thought that part of me was gone." He let out a soft breath, half laugh, half gratitude, and pulled her into his arms. She sank into him, feeling the steady rise and fall of his chest, feeling the strength in him and the tenderness he tried so hard to hide. It was a quiet hug, not rushed, not performative, just two people holding on to something fragile and beautiful. When they parted, the bakery had softened back into gentle chatter. Lily wiped her cheeks with her sleeves, then grabbed Claire's hand and looked up with bright, hopeful eyes. "Can we start planning the wedding today?" Claire laughed, the sound surprising her with its lightness. "Let's just finish today first, sweetheart." Lily nodded enthusiastically. "Okay, but can I help decorate the cake?" Michael groaned softly. "You know what happened the last time you helped with frosting?" Lily puffed up proudly. "Those were artistic choices." Claire squeezed her hand. "We'll make the cake together," she promised. "All three of us." Michael's eyes warmed at that deeply, meaningfully. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You really said yes," he whispered, almost in wonder. Claire looked down at the ring again. The single gold band gleamed softly against her skin, as if it had always belonged there. "I did." "What changed?" he asked. She swallowed, her voice gentle. "I realized something on those back steps that night. I wasn't afraid of loving again. I was afraid of losing myself again." She looked up into his eyes. "But with you, I don't feel like I disappear. I feel like I grow." Michael's breath hitched. He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "Then we'll make sure you never disappear. Not with me, not with Lily, not ever." Her chest tightened in the most beautiful way. Outside the bakery window, the first hints of dusk softened the sky. The streetlights flickered to life one by one, casting a warm glow across the sidewalk. It felt like the world itself was exhaling with her. The crowd slowly returned to browsing pastries and chatting softly, giving them space without truly leaving them. It felt like a small town moment tucked inside a city intimate, warm, held together by something deeper than coincidence. Claire glanced around her bakery, this place she had built out of exhaustion and stubbornness, out of hope she rarely acknowledged, and now it held something more, something new. Something she could trust. She pressed her palm to Michael's chest, feeling the steady beat beneath her hand. "So, what happens now?" Michael smiled, that quiet smile that always reached his eyes first. He laced their fingers together, the ring glinting between them. "Now," he said, "we decide how to begin." His voice was warm, steady, filled with possibility. But what beginning would they choose, and what would it mean for everything she had built alone? The question lingered, soft and full of promise. They chose to marry under the maple tree Lily used to play beneath. The decision felt right the moment Claire stepped into Michael's backyard that early October morning. The tree stood tall and familiar, its branches heavy with amber leaves that glowed like small lanterns in the sunlight. The ground beneath it was sprinkled with soft reds and golds, as if nature had laid out its own aisle for her. Claire paused at the screen door, her hand resting lightly on the frame. She watched the breeze stir the leaves, watched the chairs, simple wooden ones borrowed from neighbors, lined up neatly in rows. She saw Michael at the base of the tree, adjusting a strand of hanging lights while Lily buzzed around him, excited and jittery in her pale blue dress. And Claire felt her breath catch, not from fear, from the quiet miracle of being wanted in a life that had already known so much loss. Evelyn approached her from behind, her steps soft on the old wooden floorboards. "Ready?" she asked gently. Claire turned, surprised by the tenderness in the older woman's voice. Evelyn wore a navy shawl over a cream dress, elegant but understated. Her eyes held something Claire hadn't seen before: peace, maybe, or gratitude. I think so, Claire whispered. Evelyn touched her arm. You're good for him. And for Lily. I'm glad today is happening. The words landed with a warmth Claire felt down to her ribs. She stepped out into the backyard, where the late afternoon sun filtered through the maple branches, casting patches of light that danced on the grass. Friends, neighbors, a few of Michael's colleagues, no more than 24 guests took their seats, murmuring in soft anticipation. Claire recognized several regulars from her bakery, their smiles wide and proud, as if they'd watched this story unfold from the beginning. Michael turned when he heard the door close. He froze. For a moment, he didn't move at all, just stared, his eyes warming in a way that made Claire feel seen down to the smallest, most uncertain part of herself. He wasn't looking at her dress or her hair. He was looking at her, the woman who had walked into his life by accident and stayed by choice. He stepped forward slowly, as if approaching something fragile and sacred. You look good, he said quietly, his voice thick. She laughed softly. So do you. And he did. Simple gray suit, open expression, a light in his eyes she hadn't seen when they first met. Lily bounded up to Claire, nearly tripping over her excitement. You look like you belong in a storybook, she declared, grabbing Claire's hand. Daddy keeps checking his watch like he's afraid this is all a dream. Michael groaned. I was not. Lily grinned mischievously. You were. Claire squeezed the girl's hand. Well, if it is a dream, we'll just have to stay in it for as long as we can. The ceremony began without fanfare. No formal procession, no exaggerated music, just the three of them standing beneath the maple tree as the wind rustled the leaves above their heads. Their friend Mark, who had known Michael since high school, officiated with a steady warmth. He spoke about second chances, about finding love in unexpected places, about healing that arrives quietly rather than with grand gestures. Then Lily stepped forward, clutching a folded piece of paper. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted it. I wrote something, she said, her cheeks pink with nerves. Mom always told me stories make people feel less alone. So, I wanted to write one for today. Michael bent down, kissed the top of her head, and whispered something that made her straighten with courage. She unfurled the paper. It's called Second Chances, she said, because that's what this feels like. Her voice wavered at first, then steadied. Sometimes life breaks things the way pottery cracks in your hands when you're trying so hard to hold on. Sometimes you think the pieces are too sharp to touch again, but if you're brave or lucky, you try anyway. And then someone walks in with gentle hands and shows you how to fit the pieces back together. Not the same as before, not perfect, but stronger, more beautiful because it was broken and mended by love. When she finished, the yard fell silent. Several guests wiped their eyes. Michael pressed his fingers to his mouth. Overwhelmed, Claire felt tears slip down her cheek, warm as sunlight. Evelyn stepped forward next. She lifted a glass. I used to think my family's future depended on preserving the past, she said, her voice steady but softened by honesty. But I was wrong. Today I see a new chapter beginning, one filled with kindness, courage, and the kind of love that honors what came before it. She looked at Claire with something like affection. I'm grateful you found your way to us. Claire bowed her head slightly, unable to speak. Then it was time for vows. Michael took her hands, his thumbs brushing gently over her knuckles. For a moment, he couldn't speak. He closed his eyes, breathed deeply, and began. I loved once, he said quietly, deeply, honestly. I thought that chapter was the whole book. Losing her. It broke me in places I didn't think could heal. He opened his eyes, meeting Claire's. And then you showed up in the corner of a ballroom, looking like you wanted to disappear and somehow lighting up the room anyway. You didn't replace my past. You helped me build a future. Claire's breath trembled. He squeezed her hands. With you, I'm not afraid of the pieces anymore. Her heart tightened painfully, beautifully. When it was her turn, She swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper at first. "I thought my life had settled," she said. "Small, predictable, safe. I told myself I didn't need much. But you made me remember that hope isn't something for other people. It's something for me, too." She felt his hands tighten around hers, steadying her. "You and Lily gave me a home I didn't even know I was missing. And I promise whatever comes next, I will meet it with you. Not behind you or in your shadow, but right beside you." A soft wind moved through the branches, sending a scatter of leaves drifting down around them like a gentle blessing. Mark smiled. "Then it's my honor to pronounce you husband and wife." Their kiss was tender, deliberate, unhurried, a sealing of wounds, a beginning written in warmth. The guests cheered, but all Claire felt was the steady beat of Michael's heart against hers. As the evening light softened to gold and laughter floated across the yard, Claire looked around at this new family, this new chapter unfolding like the quiet turning of a page. But as the night settled deeper, a question rose softly inside her. Now that the vows were spoken, what would their first days as a new family truly feel like? The answer lingered just beyond reach, warm and full of promise. Months later, Claire unlocked the bakery at dawn, sunlight spilling across the floors she once swept alone. The early light stretched long and warm through the front windows, catching the tiny particles of flour that always floated in the air before the ovens heated up. The space looked gentler now, less like the battlefield of her old life, and more like the home she never expected to find. She stepped inside, her keys jangling softly, and inhaled the familiar scent of yeast and vanilla. It rose to meet her like an old friend. She flicked on the lights one by one, bathing the counters in a soft golden glow, the hum of the refrigerators, the quiet stillness before the morning rush, the empty pastry case waiting to be filled. These were her rituals, her anchors. But everything felt different now, because she wasn't alone anymore. Not really. Even in the quiet, she could feel the shape of her new life settling around her like a warm shawl. The bell above the door hadn't rung yet, but she knew it would soon. It always did. The mornings had changed since the wedding. Where once she arrived bleary-eyed and aching, she now woke to the sound of Michael grinding coffee beans downstairs, to Lily shuffling around the kitchen, trying to pack her school bag without waking them too early. Claire would lie still for a moment, listening to those gentle domestic sounds, letting them fill the parts of her that had once felt so desperately empty. She walked behind the counter now, setting out trays, rolling her shoulders as the morning air warmed. Her gaze drifted to a frame drawing tacked behind the register, a bright sketch of the bakery with exaggerated windows and a glowing sign. Lily had drawn it last month, the words written in careful block letters at the bottom. Home? Claire traced the edge of the frame lightly with her fingertips. Home. The word no longer carried the ache it once did. It no longer tasted like something she'd lost. It felt like something she'd grown into. She slipped her apron over her head, tied it at her waist, and began kneading dough on the stainless steel counter. The steady rhythm soothed her. Press, fold, turn. The dough warmed beneath her palms the way her life had warmed slowly, gradually, impossibly. As she worked, her mind drifted back to the night of the gala. She remembered the cold marble floors, the chandeliers, the glittering dresses. She remembered thinking she had no place there. She remembered trying to escape unnoticed. Then she remembered his whisper, "Please, pretend you're with me." How strange, she thought now, that a moment so small a breath, barely audible, had altered the shape of her entire future. Her hands paused over the dough. She wasn't someone who believed in fate, not really, but she believed in turning toward warmth when it found you. She believed in saying yes, even when your voice trembled. She believed in second chances. She dusted flour off her palms and moved toward the front door to flip the sign to open. Before she reached it, she saw movement outside. Michael stood on the sidewalk, one hand holding 2 steaming cups of coffee, the other tucked casually in his jacket pocket. Lily stood beside him, balancing her backpack, waving through the glass with the same bright enthusiasm she greeted most things in life now, the sight of them waiting for her, smiling as though this simple morning moment was enough, hit her with a tenderness so sudden she had to steady herself with a hand on the counter. She took a slow breath, letting the warmth settle. She opened the door, the bell chiming sweetly. "You're early," she said, though her voice was soft with affection. Michael held out the coffee. "Thought I'd bring your favorite. Figured the morning rush might hit hard today. And I wanted to show you something," Lily added, digging into her backpack. She pulled out a small drawing, a tiny version of the maple tree they had married under, surrounded by swirling autumn leaves. Beneath it was a simple caption, "Not the end, the beginning." Claire felt her throat tighten. "It's beautiful." Lily beamed. "It's for the bakery wall." Michael laughed. "Apparently the bakery wall is hers now." "Only a little bit," Lily corrected. They stepped inside, the warm smell of dough greeting them. Michael set the coffee on the counter and slipped an arm around Claire's waist, pulling her gently against him. The gesture was so natural now, so deeply woven into her mornings, that she leaned into it without thought. "How are you feeling?" he murmured. Claire looked around the bakery, the sunlight, the stillness, the hum of new beginnings. She thought about the fear she used to carry, the loneliness she once wore like an extra layer of clothing. She thought about how quietly it had all been replaced, piece by piece, by something stronger. "Good," she said softly. "Really good." He kissed her temple. "I'm glad." She watched him lead Lily toward the display case, pretending to inspect imaginary pastries for an imaginary breakfast. Their laughter floated toward her, light and warm. Claire rested her palms on the counter and let her breath steady. Years of doubt, years of believing she'd missed her chance, years of walking through life alone, and yet here she was, not late, not forgotten, not broken beyond repair, just finally arriving where she was meant to be. She felt the truth of it rise inside her, gentle and certain. She whispered it aloud, not for anyone else to hear, but for herself. "I was never too late. I was just on my way here." The words settled through her like light through windows, soft, warm, assuring. Outside, the sun continued to climb, casting longer rays through the glass. The bell above the door chimed again as Michael and Lily stepped back outside to wait for her to finish opening up, waving one more time. Claire watched them, hand resting against the cool surface of the display case. And somewhere deep inside her, a quiet question formed, one she didn't fear, one that felt like an invitation. What if the second half of her life could be the most beautiful part? The thought lingered, bright as morning. Sometimes, healing begins in the quietest places, right in the moments we're convinced nothing good could possibly find us again. Life has a way of surprising us like that, slipping a bit of warmth into the cracks we've tried so hard to seal. One gentle truth is this: it's never too late to move towards something softer, kinder, more honest. We spend so many years believing our story has already been written, that our chances have passed us by. But often, the second half of life carries a different kind of beauty, one shaped by everything we've survived, everything we've learned to let go of. Another truth is that connection doesn't always arrive the way we imagined. Sometimes it shows up quietly, disguised as a small moment, a whisper, a kindness, a hand you didn't expect to hold again. And when it does, the bravest thing we can do is let ourselves receive it. If you're carrying a little ache tonight, or wondering whether new beginnings still have room for you, I hope this story reminds you the heart has no age for rediscovery, and the light that finds you late often shines the warmest. Thank you for spending a little of your day with this story. Your presence here truly matters more than you know. If the journey touched something in you, a simple like share or subscribe helps carry these gentle stories to someone else who might need a moment of warmth. Wishing you peace, steady light, and a soft place to land tonight.